The main causes of the Great War. First of all, militarism, which was a policy of building up a strong military to prepare for war. Alliances. Nations made agreements to provide and protect each other. Nationalism, where they took extreme pride in their country. Imperialism, when one country took over another country economically and politically speaking. And finally, the assassination of Austrian Archduke Francis Ferdinand. The Great War was unlike any other war before it. It was a war of firsts. Never before had technology been put to such destructive ends. It was characterized by trench warfare, in which opposing armies would dig trenches into the earth in order to cover themselves. The open space between the opposing trench systems was referred to as no man's land, because no man wanted to enter this dangerous area. It was the first war in which the airplane saw widespread use, also the first one involving tanks. Submarines and modern poison gas also had their first widespread use in World War I. Between many, here are three decisions that were made at the Treaty of Versailles. Germany was blamed and therefore they would pay the war cost. The countries that won wanted to cripple Germany. The Austro-Hungarian Empire broke up and Czechoslovakia became a nation. Nations like Poland and Finland, between others, became independent. It is important to note that this treaty was made at the end of the Great War, but it's one of the main reasons for World War II start.
The Treaty of Versailles had a massive impact on geography, politics, and economy. In geography, the Treaty of Versailles radically altered the geography of the map of Europe. Because of Germany losing the territory, the provinces of Valence and Lorraine returned to France. Parts of Switzerland were ceded to Denmark. To the east, new countries were created to roughly match the ethnic balance of the area, and finally, the Polish Courier was created, which waved the poles and bore strip to a land that connected into the sea, and consequently separated the East Prussia from the rest of Germany. The treaty also called for the trial of the former Kaiser. This never happened as the Dutch government refused to hand him over. But this efficiently stopped any chance of restoration of monarchy in Germany. Also, Germany became politically isolated in the West. The Great Depression. It began in 1929 and lasted until 1939. Although it originated in the United States, the Great Depression caused dramatic decline in output, severe unemployment, and acute deflation in almost every country of the world. Its social and cultural effects were notwithstanding, especially in the United States, where the Great Depression represented the harshest adversity faced by Americans since the Civil War. The causes of this huge depression could be pointed at two important factors. Number one, the stock of the market crashed on 1929. Number two, the bank failures. Throughout the 1930s, over 9,000 banks failed. Bank deposits were initiated, and this, as the banks failed, people simply lost their savings. Number three, reduction of purchasing across the board. With the stock market crash and the fears of further economic woes, individuals from classes stopped purchasing items. This then led to a reduction in the number of items produced, and this a reduction of workforce. Number four, American economic policy with Europe. Causes of the rising of totalitarian regimes. First, the humiliating treatment of all Europe to Germany by the Treaty of Versailles created a sense of hardened and revenge in Germans. Hitler fully exploited this sentiment to establish his own dictatorship in Germany. Secondary, the Treaty of Versailles greatly disappointed Italy. The Italian leaders felt that though they had won the war, they lost the peace. Naturally, the Italians were on look out for a man who would help them achieve their national ambitions. But it's important to mention the failure of the League of Nations to check aggression and preserve world peace, and the recent depression that the whole world suffered greatly contributed to the rise of totalitarian regimes. Totalitarianism can be defined as imposing of a form of a government in which the political authority exercises absolute and centralized control over all aspects of life. The individual is subordinated to the state, and opposing political and cultural expression is suppressed. In 1924, the regime of Joseph Stalin rise and was established after the death of Lenin. It was until the death in 1952 that his regime was over. His regime was located in the Soviet Union.
Joseph Stalin was born on December 18, 1878. He was a dictator of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or USSR, from 1929 to 1953. After Bolshevik leader Vladimir Lenin died, Stalin outmaneuvered his rivals for control of the party. Under Stalin, the Soviet Union was transformed from a peasant society into an industrial and military superpower. However, he ruled by terror and millions of his own citizens died during his brutal regime. Stalin forced rapid industrialization and the collectivization of agricultural land, resulting in millions dying from famine while others were sent to camps. His Red Army helped defeat the Nazi Germany during the World War II.
Stalinism is a name given to the political and economic system which Joseph Stalin implemented in the Soviet Union between 1934 and 1953, while he was General Secretary of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. It includes a command economy, an extensive use of propaganda to establish a personality cult around an absolute dictator, and the use of the secret police to maintain social submission.
The ideology of Stalin was Marxism-Leninism, which was the modification of Marxism by Lenin, stressing that imperialism is the highest form of capitalism.
Stalin's rule witnessed violations of human rights on a massive scale. It should be remembered that the communist thought generally rejected the idea of natural human rights, primarily because of their solely political nature. But Stalin's violations were not due to any ideological objections to bourgeois political constructs. They were aimed at expanding the power of the Soviet state. To this end, he had rivals murdered on his rise to power and purged the party to consolidate his gains, having thousands of loyal former Bolsheviks imprisoned or executed without trial. His greatest human rights violation occurred as a result of the collectivization efforts of the early 1930s. Millions of Russian and Ukrainian peasants were forced off of their holdings and onto collective farms. Small landholders, known as kulaks, were essentially liquidated. Moreover, quotas for the collectives were not adjusted for poor harvests, and millions starved to death, both due to famine and deliberate policy on the form of USSR. Once secure in his power, Stalin created a formidable police state, using secret police to spy on civilians and imprisoning those accused of dissent. Thousands of intellectuals, artists, and other dissidents were sent to the infamous gulags in Siberia and elsewhere. Overall, Stalin's rule, as his successor Nikita Khrushchev would point out in his so-called secret speech, was characterized by flagrant violations of human rights.